It's a delay. Okay, we're live now. Well, thank you for watching another episode of the Jude 3 Project podcast. As always, I'm your host, Lisa Fields, the founder of the Jude 3 Project. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Vince Vitale. Welcome, Vince.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be with you on my first Google Hangout. I'm very excited.
I appreciate you joining me. And you're in the RZIM office there in Atlanta, right?
That's right. And just recently, my wife and I were based in the RZIM office in Oxford, England. We met there. We were married there. My wife's from England, and we just moved over about 2 months ago. So we're trying to figure out the South, and we are now Atlanta residents, which we're very excited about. And it's 70 degrees in the middle of January. I'm from New Jersey originally, so I'm very much enjoying that. And we've made the move to help launch a new initiative called the Zacharias Institute, which will be launching at the end of March.
Mm-hmm. Before we get into that, can you give just a little bit of background for those who don't know who you are, our listeners?
Absolutely. Born in New Jersey, Italian-American, I would say culturally Catholic family. You know, Italian-Americans from New Jersey, therefore Catholic, therefore Christian. But faith was not something we thought a lot about. We weren't churchgoers, and it wasn't a daily part of our lives. When I got to college, I met some people, actually two guys who I was playing soccer with at the time. They invited me to a meeting of Athletes in Action, which is the athletic ministry of Campus Crusade. And I can remember very distinctly showing up and seeing people who otherwise seemed like, you know, cool folks that I would hang out with, you know, athletes my age. And here they were singing their hearts out to this invisible God. And I thought, whatever I mean when I say, yeah, I'm Italian-American, therefore Catholic, therefore Christian, and whatever these people mean when they say I'm Christian are two different things. So I didn't become a Christian for another 6 months or so, but that was a very significant point that started a search on my part of asking a lot of hard questions. I was studying philosophy at the time. I didn't feel I could just park my brain at the door. If this was a blind leap of faith, I didn't think it was for me, but I started asking hard questions. Thankfully, I was part of a community there that took my questions seriously, pointed me to good resources. As the intellectual objections started to get cleared away, that kind of opened the path for me to be more honest about what was in my heart and for God to begin to connect with me on a relational level. And about 6 months later, in my dorm room, I was on my own. There was nobody there, but that just kind of conviction of the reality of God and what Jesus had done hit me. And I exclaimed out loud, "Oh man, this really happened." And, you know, have had that sense since. Somehow 2 weeks later, I wound up on a trip down to Panama City Beach, Florida, where we were trying to actually share about Christianity with people who, you know, had just gone down there to have a good time. And I don't know how I wound up on that trip, but very quickly after I became a Christian, I had a positive experience of sharing Christianity with others and seeing that light that kind of goes on in someone's eyes when they begin to glimpse who Jesus really is for the first time. And so I've never known Christianity apart from sharing Christianity. Those two things have always been integrated in my Christian life. Incredibly thankful for that, and really that kind of set the trajectory for the rest of my life to this point as a Christian, where I've been trying to seek different ways to take questions seriously through academic pursuits and engaging in the university, and then trying to seek opportunities to share the faith in a way that people can find relevant to them and connect with.
Mm-hmm. And you actually just recently published a new book with my favorite apologist of all time, Dr. Ravi Zacharias.
That's right.
For our audience who don't know about the book, can you just tell a little bit about the new book and what was the purpose behind the book? Because this is kind of a sequel to Jesus Amongst Other Gods.
That's right. Dr. Zacharias, also my favorite apologist. And what an honor to work with him on this project. We had done one book together before called Why Suffering, looking at the problem of evil. And actually, when I became a Christian in college, it was in those first couple of years that I first read Jesus Among Other Gods, which was a significant resource for me. So particular privilege to work on this. And actually it was the publisher who came to us and said, we have this idea for a book. You've written Jesus Among Other Gods, Ravi, and that was a really helpful resource for people. And we think it's time now, as we move into increasingly a culture which is secularized. The Economist a couple of months ago talked about us living in a post-truth society. And then even after that, Oxford English Dictionary made post-truth their word of the year for the year 2016. So the publisher, felt, and we thought it was a really brilliant idea to say, let's do Jesus among secular gods. So not specifically looking at other religions, but looking at different atheistic ways of seeing the world and putting them side by side with Christianity. We always try to have people in mind when we write. We always, we're not just writing about ideas or theories, but we're trying to write with people in mind and for people. And for me, one of those people was a student, and really multiple students. About 6 months ago, I was in Chicago on some different university campuses. I do a lot of ministry to campuses. And we had, on the way into one of our events, we had a big whiteboard where people could come up and answer the question, what is the meaning of life? And across the top of the board, we had all different options. It could be to pass on your genes. It could be to be successful. It could be to make money. It could be to sacrificially love others. And we had all these different options across the top. And my lasting image of that was of students confidently walking up to the board, grabbing the marker, looking at the options, and then really just standing there, paralyzed. Sometimes for minutes on end, and you could sort of see the confidence drain off their faces, as many of them really didn't have any idea where to start in terms of how to answer that question. And I think when you think about where we are as a society today, one, we have so many choices in front of us in terms of how we're going to see the world. It's almost paralyzing. There's so much choice. And secondly, to even suggest that you have a way of seeing the world which might be the right way or might be better than other ways is very often immediately branded as intolerant and as extremist and as narrow-minded. So there's a couple of different factors which are making the age we live in right now a very difficult one to take a respectful look at the options and make an informed decision about what you want at the center of your life, what or who you are going to trust, and how that's going to set the trajectory for your life. So that's really what we wanted to do. Criticism without alternative is empty. Lots of times people want to criticize one way of seeing the world, but not put anything else in its place. But we all have questions that we need to answer. Ravi likes to talk about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. If you want to live a coherent life, everyone needs to answer questions of where did we come from? What's the purpose of life? Therefore, how should we live? And ultimately, where are we headed? Christianity has answers to those questions, and I'm not sure that any other way of seeing the world has answers that are as coherent, as compelling, and as true to our lived experience. So we wanted to put a variety of options on the table, a book both for Christians but also for non-Christians, and really our hope and prayer is that Christians will read the book and they'll say, this is something that I want to give to a friend of mine, so that they can take a respectful look at the different options and make an informed decision.
What has been some of the feedback you've received from the book?
It's been incredibly encouraging. I mean, if people aren't sure if the book is for them and they want to check it out, feel free to jump online at Amazon.com or Goodreads or Christian book distributors. We have over 100 reviews of the book in a little over a week, and just so encouraging to hear that people are finding it helpful, encouraging, persuasive. They're not finding it overly technical, but they're finding it to have content that can actually be used in the day-to-day. And hopefully that's because we have people in mind. So, when we write a chapter on scientism, we're not just dealing with theories, but we're thinking of the person who says, well, I couldn't be a Christian because I'm a scientist, or I couldn't be a Christian because science is explaining everything or ultimately will explain everything. You know, we know people who say things like that, and we're trying to write in such a way that to say this is the way you might engage with that person in a helpful manner.
You talked about kind of the tension for many with science and faith. How do you navigate through that space, being a former skeptic yourself and being on college campuses? Because I hear a lot about that as well. And one of my friends is an OBGYN, and she talks about how her colleagues often make fun of her faith and compare it to believing in unicorns. So how do you kind of navigate that space with the book?
And yeah, it's an objection and a concern that I really resonate with. In fact, I have a memory of, as a college student, before I was a Christian, I remember walking into a bookstore one day and seeing a book that was about Christianity, and I read the back cover, and the book explained itself as an attempt to hold on to Christianity while explaining away everything miraculous. So in other words, to be able to explain everything in scientific, naturalistic terms, but still hold on to a form of Christianity. And I can remember hoping it could be done. Because at that point, I was reading the Gospels. I was so compelled and attracted to the person of Jesus. I was longing for the person of Jesus, but I just didn't think we could take seriously, you know, the claims of the miraculous. And I had this kind of assumption. I never had really thought it through, and I don't think anyone had actually ever given me good arguments for it. But there was just this assumption in culture that somehow, because science was explaining more and more things, science in some way had disproved God. This is actually one of the questions that I most enjoy responding to, because I think that it really is an assumption. It's an unfounded rumor. And when you think it through, you can see that it's not the case. I mean, here's just a couple of thoughts, but you know, there's a lot more in the book. But if you think about arguably the two most significant scientific discoveries in cosmology with respect to the universe in the last 100 years, you might say that the first one is that the universe has a beginning. Over 100 years ago, many people would have thought the universe just always existed. And if it always existed, if there had never been a change from non-existence to existence, then maybe it didn't require a further explanation. But scientists now believe that the universe had a beginning. And if it went through that change, if it went from non-existence to existence, well, something has to explain that. And something which is very powerful and very creative in order to get a universe of this sort. Now, positing the existence of God gives you a very good explanation for that scientific fact. You go back, you know, right to the very beginning of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In fact, at the time, some of the great scientists of the day were hesitant to accept this conclusion because they saw that it cohered so well with what the Bible was saying. And if you don't have God as your explanation for how things got started, it's not clear what another good explanation would be. Another of the scientific facts is the fine-tuning of the universe. That's what people call it. But really, it's just the idea that our universe is life-friendly. The chances of life being possible in a universe, according to scientists, not just atheistic scientists, not just Christian scientists, but scientists across the board, say that the possibility of any form of life, not just on the planet Earth, but any form of life anywhere on the universe coming to exist is utterly, utterly minuscule. The numbers that they throw around are something like 1 in 10 to the power of 10 raised in turn to the power of 123. You couldn't even write out that number. You would need more zeros to write out that number than you have particles in the universe. That's how likely scientists are telling us it is to get life in the universe if the universe is just the product of randomness or chance. But of course, if the universe is the product of a relational God who's powerful and intelligent and relational and desires to bring people into existence that he can call to himself and bring into relationship with himself for all eternity, well, then it's not surprising that you have life in the universe. So again, you have a very good explanation if you believe in God, and it's not clear what your explanation is if you don't. And then a last thing just to mention is the regularity of the universe. The regularity of the universe is necessary for us to even do science. We live in a world which is explainable, which has patterns and regularities that we can therefore put scientific theories to and test and come to conclusions. But if God doesn't exist, if we just live in a world of randomness and chance, why should we expect that the universe would be regular in that way? Why should we expect that it would be scientifically testable and patterned such that we could come to natural, regular conclusions about things? I don't think we should expect that if God doesn't exist. Einstein even saw this. He said that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. And he's getting at the same point. If you take God out of the picture, there's no reason that you should expect the regularity that leads to scientific conclusions. Mm-hmm. So not only do I not think that science disproves God, but I actually think that only God proves science. God is a very good engineer, and he engineered the world in a beautiful way such that it is regular and such that we could look into it and we could come to have scientific discoveries. And that's one of the ways that we come to know him. So sorry, you've gotten me going there, and I can talk about that all day.
No, good.
It's an exciting thing to talk about because I don't feel like when I speak on that topic, I'm on the back foot. I don't have to be defensive about that question. The question about whether science disproves God, not only does science not disprove God, but actually it points to God in some really exciting ways. And so when I get that question, it's to me just an open door in front of me to be able to share something about who God is and the way he's made the world.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people forget when there are scientific discoveries or that seemingly they use to try to disprove belief in God, that those are sometimes just theories. They're still discovering things. So that's just kind of their hypothesis. It's not necessarily fact. So I think people forget that about science.
That's a very helpful addition. And one way of putting it is that the vast majority of scientific theories that throughout history at one point were considered proven and considered the consensus are now considered to be false. Mm-hmm. We don't think about it that way, but most of the scientific theories that at one point people thought, yes, that's absolutely true, we now think are false. So you're right, we have to be very careful as Christians about assuming, we read about a new scientific discovery in the newspaper or we see it on TV, and now all of a sudden we start reframing our theology or we start reading scripture differently because of this so-called scientific discovery. Whereas the reality is 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 300 years from now, what science believes is going to look a lot different than it does today. So we need to ground ourselves in something which is much more stable than science, which is the Word of God.
Amen. I do agree. We want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that I'm very excited about. I'm excited to attend the opening in March. The Zacharias Institute, which you're heading in the ATL. Tell us about that.
That's great. The ATL, I like that. See, I need to get my lingo down. I don't know yet how to refer to the place that I actually live. That's good. So we're really excited about this. The Zacharias Institute, RZIM has been in existence for decades now, and the reason I'm so excited about this new initiative is because of the fruitfulness I've seen over the last 7 years that I've been a part of the RZIM ministry. I really have seen great effectiveness in terms of how we equip Christians to be excited about and confident to share their faith and to deal with the questions of their friends and their families. And then also when we're doing evangelism, when we're actually sharing the faith with people, to see people respond, to see people actually take that step of stepping into a relationship with Jesus that is grounded, which is mature, which is lasting, and is going to be there for eternity. What an incredible thing to see. And as part of this ministry, I genuinely have gotten to see that or rejoice at my colleagues seeing that every week, week after week after week. And so for me, the reason I'm so excited about the Zacharias Institute is because it's all about trying to hand on as much as we can to the church and many different aspects of the church, that effectiveness that we're seeing as we use this model of evangelism that takes people's questions seriously. The tagline that we're using for the Zacharias Institute is the questions of culture and the invitation of Christ. You need both of them. You have to take people's questions seriously. You need to come alongside them and start where they are, but you also need to actually invite them to Jesus. If I'm throwing a great party, but I never send you an invitation, for most people, it's unlikely that you're just going to show up. And so we try to do both things. We take people's questions seriously, and then we actually do invite people into that relationship. And the Zacharias Institute is going to be all about all different forms of training that will help people to do that and to do that effectively. We're going to be having training programs lasting everywhere from a 2-day conference to several weeks. Many of those will be open to anyone looking at the toughest questions that the church is facing today. Some of those programs will be more specific to certain groups of people, whether that's for emerging apologists, people who are sensing a specific call into apologetics and evangelism. We want to come alongside those people in a holistic way with several members of our team and really help them identify that calling, discern how it's supposed to be lived out, and then release them into all that God has for them. But we want there to be conferences for parents trying to figure out how to raise children in today's world, conferences for business leaders, conferences on different themes, whether it's atheism or sexuality or suffering or science. This is the first time that as a ministry, we have owned a facility. And by God's unbelievable provision over the last couple of years, we've been able to purchase a building, and we spent the last year refurbishing it. And it now includes a several hundred person auditorium, classrooms, seminar rooms, an art gallery, a cafe, a reading room, a bookstore. And it's just going to be a wonderful environment to learn in. And we want to bring together theory and the arts and a practical expression of the faith into a holistic type of training that I think people are really going to enjoy and find really effective as well. So our dedication, as you mentioned, is coming up at the end of March, and we're going to roll into our first programs in April.
And that's open to anyone, correct?
That's absolutely right. And you can go on to www.rzim.org. As of just a few days ago, we put up some of the details for our first few events. And in the coming few weeks, you can expect more and more events and programs to be listed there. And you can go ahead and register or apply, depending on the program, right through the website.
That's awesome. I'm very excited because you're, like you say, you're equipping people to be practitioners, because sometimes if you have a love for apologetics, it can quickly become something that's just an obsession, and you just talk about theories and questions and never get people to the gospel. So the emphasis on not only taking people's questions, but leading them to a point of decision, I think it's important and something that sometimes us apologists forget. So I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's where we're so grateful for Ravi as he has set the tone for this ministry and led this ministry. I can't tell you how often we get people writing in and they say, you did have good answers to my questions, and that was significant. But even more significant was the way that you treated me as you responded to my questions. You took my questions seriously. You took me seriously. You engaged with gentleness and respect. And that is part of the content of our message, because through that we are communicating something about who God is and the type of relationship that he wants to be in with the person. So for us, it's never first and foremost about ideas or theories. It's always about people.
That's great. Contending without being contentious is important. So
Well said.
Is there any other ways, any other things you would like to share with us before we close out here?
Well, I really just hope that people will come and check out the Institute. One other thing which I didn't mention is that we're going to have the capability through technology as we're using right now, to live stream many of the events that we're doing as well. So for some people, it's going to be easier to get down to the ATL. For other people, that may not be easy, but many of the events we're also going to have great capability and technology to be able to send out the lectures through a live stream so people can engage, whether it's at their church or individually, with the content and with the manner in which we're going about apologetics and evangelism. So hopefully that's exciting to people. Maybe one other thing I'll mention is we love doing things on campuses. One of the things that's most exciting is when we get to go to a campus for 5 days in a row. We call them a university mission or a university events week. And the wonderful thing about that is that you can journey with people, not just coming in for one event and then leaving, and maybe someone's been impacted, but there's no real way to follow up with it. But this way we can come alongside local churches and campus ministries and journey Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And we often find that people who are hardened to the faith on Monday slowly begin to open up. By the middle of the week, have actually formed some good relationships.
Hello?
And they're ready to take that step of relationship with Jesus. So if you're listening and you are a college student, or you are a campus minister, or you know somebody who is on campus and would like to, or even a local church who'd like to, bring in a team to engage with your community for several days in a row, that's something that we find really effective, something that we get really excited about. We'd love to hear from you about any opportunities like that as well.
That's amazing. What are your social media handles for those who want to connect with you via social
media? Great. So I'm at Vince R. Vitale. Good Italian. My parents gave me a good Italian name, Vincent Raphael Vitale Jr. So it's Vince, the letter R, Vitale is my Twitter handle. And then on Facebook, you can find me, Vince Vitale. On Facebook, I got a couple pages, a personal page and a public page there. And I've been dragging my feet on Instagram, but I think our media team's going to have me on there before long. So
you got to get on the ground.
I know, that's what I'm hearing. You see, you finally get up to speed on one of these platforms, and then it's going out of business, and there's a new one. So
yeah, next you'll be on Snapchat, but
yeah, oh my goodness,
I'm not even on Snapchat yet. It's
okay.
Too much. Too many social media accounts. It's overwhelming. Well, thank you so much, Vince. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa. Great privilege to be with you. Hope we can talk again. And I'm looking forward to having you at the Institute in a couple months as well.
Yes, I'm excited.
Great. All right. God bless you.
God bless you.